Hello and welcome to CS2212, Introduction to Software Engineering. In this course, we're going to explore the world of software engineering, and more importantly, you're going to learn to work in a team to create software. I'm going to be your instructor. That's me on the screen right now. My name is Daniel Servos, and if you ever need to get in contact with me, my email is dservos5@uwo.ca. And you can make office hours with me with this link on the screen here, danielservos.ca/apt. And this will allow you to make an appointment for an office hour. So a little bit about background about me. I got my PhD here at Western University in the area of access control, and I did my master's in undergrad in computer science at Lakehead University. If you ever need to find me on campus, like I said, my office is in Middlesex College, and it is MC387. This is on the 3rd floor of Middlesex College. I have it highlighted here on the map. So what is this course? What have you got yourself into? Well, Computer Science 2212 is an introduction to software engineering and its applications in team software projects. This applications in team software projects is particularly important because in this course, you're going to be working on a group project with 4 other students. In this course, we're going to examine the stages of the software engineering process, including requirements gathering, specification, design, implementation, and testing. And you're going to explore all of these through that group project I mentioned. We're also going to cover a number of different practicalities of software engineering and a number of key tools and technologies leveraged in successful endeavors. The overall goal here is to make you a good software engineer, so when you get out there in the real world, you'll be able to function on a team. Now, the format of this course is going to be blended, which means there's going to be a combination of in-class lectures with online components such as lecture videos. This might be a little bit different than what you've experienced in the past, so let's get into how this is going to work. And it's going to be based on which day the lecture is. So in the Tuesday lecture time, which is 10:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. in the Arts and Humanities Building, room 1R40, we're going to have lectures, tutorials, and short group work activities. Attending this lecture is important, not only just to get the background you need to be successful in this course, but also because attendance and participation is going to be counted during the Tuesday lecture. This is going to count towards your final grade as part of the participation component. We'll get more into that later. The other lecture time, the Friday lecture time, which is 11:30 p.m. to 12:30 p.m. in the same building and room, is more optional. The idea here is that unless there's a quiz that week, this is free time to do a few things. It's time to watch those online lecture videos. It's also a time you can meet with your group to work on the team project because you know everyone in your team should have this hour off. So that gives you at least an hour every week that you have dedicated to working on the project with your team. So you don't actually have to attend the physical lecture room to meet with your team. You can meet with your team anywhere you want, but you're given this hour as free time. Now, one thing to note is there are 3 quizzes in this course, and in weeks where we have a quiz, it's going to be held during this time. So in those 3 weeks, you will have to attend the Friday lecture time to write your quiz. Now, there's a few online sites and tools we're going to be using in this course that you should be aware of. The first one is Owl Brightspace. And this is going to be our main course site where you can find most of the content for the course. This includes the syllabus, slides for each week, the project details and resources, forums, weekly readings, homework and tasks, announcements, the lecture videos, supplementary resources, and all that stuff. It'll also be where you're submitting the group project components as we get to each one. And this site is going to be updated weekly, usually on Monday at 8 a.m. So it's very important that you stay up to date with the site, turn on your Brightspace notifications, and make sure you check it at least once a week. Usually on Monday would be your best bet. The other site we're going to be using is CS1.ca, and this is what's called the Ask tool. And this is an in-class response system that'll allow you to submit group work as well as ask questions live during the lecture. We'll talk more about this in our first lecture. And the last big online site we'll be using is GitLab. And this is a project management tool for use in group projects, particularly software projects. It's going to include a few important things: a Git repository for storing your code, a wiki for doing your design work on, and an issue tracker for tracking any tasks that you assign to your group members, as well as tracking issues that need to be resolved in your code. So we are going to give you more information about how to access the site after groups are formed, but you do have to use the version of GitLab that's provided by Western. So don't go and sign up for GitLab. We're going to be providing you with your own specific accounts. And we'll talk more about that once that's set up, but all of the work you do in the group project has to be on GitLab. Now, what is the required course materials for this course? Well, there's 2 texts that we're going to talk about. The first required textbook is Software Engineering, A Practitioner's Approach, and you should be able to see a picture of that on the screen right now. This is the 9th edition, so I do highly recommend that you get the correct edition. So how are we going to use this text? Well, each week, readings will be assigned from this textbook, and we'll also have a list of recommended homework questions are going to be assigned from this text. These homework questions are completely ungraded, so while I do list this textbook as required because you will be expected to know the content of the assigned chapters for things like quizzes and the final exam, we aren't going to be grading anything directly from it. There is 2 different versions of this textbook you can get, a physical copy, which is a physical book that you can get from the bookstore, as well as an e-textbook rental. That would be an online version of the textbook. Either one is fine for this course, and you don't need any of that online stuff that comes with it, like McGraw-Hill's sort of course system. So we don't need that. So a physical copy, a used copy is all fine. Now, I do have a tentative reading list here. I'm not going to read it out to you, but you can look at it. It should be in the slides as well as this video if you want to start reading ahead. We're going to try to cover all of these chapters during the course. Now, the other textbook, which is technically listed as optional, is UML Distilled 3rd edition. Now, I say this is optional because we're not going to really assign too many readings from it, and there's not going to be any homework questions from it. And most of the content will also be covered in lectures. However, I strongly recommend that at least one person in your group gets a hold of this text. It's a really great introduction to UML, which you're going to be using in your group project, and it explains it in a very simple and easy to understand way. It's a really great resource, so I recommend that you obtain a copy, however you want to do that. Now, on to what you're probably really worried about, student evaluation. So there's 3 big elements in this course. The group project, which is going to be 54% in total. We'll break down that in a little bit. Participation, which will be for attending that Tuesday lecture time. It's going to be worth 10%. And quizzes or a final exam. I'll explain what I mean by that or in a little bit, but that's going to be worth 36%. But it is important to note that this course does have essential requirements. These are requirements that you must pass to obtain a passing mark in the course, 50% or over. It doesn't matter what your other grades are on the group project, participation, and so on. You need to meet these requirements to be able to pass the course. So let's go through them. The first one is your weighted quiz and final exam grade has to be at least 40%. Now, this is a weighted average, so it doesn't mean you have to get at least 40% on every quiz or the final exam. It means that based on the worth of that element, for example, each quiz, I believe, is 12%. When we calculate all that, it has to be over 40%. The next essential requirement is that you must attend and be present in person at the acceptance testing meeting at the end of the course. So at the end of the course, you're going to get together with your TA, that's going to be assigned to your team, as well as to your other team members, and you're going to show them your software. This isn't going to be a formal presentation. It's going to be sitting down with your TA and basically showing off the work you've done this term. But this meeting is mandatory, so please make sure that you attend it. The last one is that you have to be an active participant in the group project. You can't simply let your other group members do all the other work. You won't pass the course if you do that. So how do we define an active participant? Well, there's a few elements here. The first one is that at the end of the course, there's going to be a peer evaluation of your performance in the team project. This is going to be an evaluation done by your other team members, and you have to pass this evaluation. That might sound a little bit scary, but it's not a zero-sum evaluation. And by that, I mean there is no advantage to your team giving someone else a lower grade. So if your team wanted to, you could give everyone 100% on the peer evaluation. That would be completely fine. We have this rule so you don't basically ghost your team and let them do all the work. So it is very important in this course to stay on good terms with your team, stay actively communicating with them, and make sure you're attending all the group meetings with them. The next part of this is you have to contribute in some way to each milestone. So there's going to be multiple milestones in the group project with different due dates, and you have to do at least something for each of those milestones. That could be documentation, it could be coding, but you have to be in some way involved in that milestone. And the last requirement is that you're going to have to regularly attend both your team's weekly meetings and the bi-weekly stand-up meeting with your assigned TA. We'll talk more about what those are soon. But the requirement here is that you have to attend at least half of those. So let's talk more about that group project I mentioned a few times. So in this course, all students are required to be an active participant in a term-long group project that will involve the specification, design, and implementation of a reasonably large-scale software system implemented using Java. So there are a few rules for this project, and I'll stress them again. We talked about some of them in the essential requirements. The first is all team members are expected to contribute in some way to every project component, including the requirements stage, the design stage, the implementation stage, and the testing stage. Next, all teams must make active use of the GitLab software. So as I mentioned, GitLab will be one of the software packages that we're using in this course, and your team is required to use the GitLab system provided to you by Western. So you have to use your Western accounts on Western's copy of GitLab. You can't use somewhere else. And all the work you do in the project has to be on GitLab. Your TA is going to have access to this, so that's going to be part of the way that they access your work. Number 3, all teams must hold and document weekly face-to-face meetings. So after January 20th, you're going to be meeting each week with your team. You can make that anytime you want in the week. That's up to your team to decide. But you do have to document these meetings by writing the minutes down in the GitLab wiki. We'll talk more about that in the course when we get there. Now, what is the group project going to be about? Well, this term, we are going to be doing a virtual pet game. So the main purpose of the project will be to create an educational virtual pet game that attempts to teach the player how to take care of a pet. The game should be able to keep track of vital statistics about the pet, so for example, its health, hunger, sleep, exercise, and so on, and give the player ways to interact with the pet that alter these statistics, such as feeding the pet, taking them for the walk, and so on. We'll provide a far more detailed specification as we go in the course, so don't jump into coding yet. There is going to be a lot of documentation that goes into this. In this course, a big focus is on the other parts of the software that come along with it, other than just the code. These are things like requirements gathering and design work. So again, don't jump into coding yet. We want to actually plan this out and do it properly. So please wait for the specification to be posted. Now you might be a bit worried because you haven't done any game programming before. Well, this game doesn't have to be necessarily graphically demanding. There's going to be a fairly basic graphical user interface that you are going to have to provide, and it should follow best practices for UI design, but we're not expecting like 3D worlds or something like that. It's going to be fairly static images. A good example of what's expected, if you remember these things like Tamagotchis, they were popular in the 90s, but they have started to see a comeback. These were little handheld virtual pets. We're expecting something like this, very basic graphics with a few options to interact with the pet, like feeding it. So this full project specification for this is going to be posted on OWL by January 13th. After that's out, you can start working on the project, and the first task is going to be requirements gathering. So what are your group's responsibilities going to be in this project? Well, the first one is to form your team. So teams are going to have 4 or 5 students. The project is designed so it could be accomplished by teams of 4 or 5, but 5 is preferred. And you're going to make your team by making your request on OWL by joining an open team. OWL now supports what it calls self-enrollment groups, which means that on OWL you can pick a team and join it. So the way to pick your team members is to all agree on a certain team number. There'll be a list of, I believe, 90 teams. You pick one with the same number, and you all join that same team. And you have to do this by January 18th. If you don't do this by January 18th, you're going to be added to one of the teams randomly by Brightspace. So if you request a team with less than 5 students, I may add additional students to that team to top it up. So if you want to pick your exact team members, make sure that you all join the team and that there's at least 5 of you on the team, and that will guarantee that you get that team. I'll try to honor all your requests, but with teams with less than 5 members, may have to be broken up to make groups of 5. The next group responsibility will be weekly meetings with your team. So on the week of January 20th, group meetings will start, and this is where you meet with your team to discuss the group project and work on any elements of the group project. And you do have to record minutes for these meetings. This doesn't have to be complicated. It should simply be a list of what was discussed, bullet points, what action items were decided, again, bullet points, who were they assigned to, as well as who was in the meeting, who was present, as well as where you met and how the meeting was conducted. So these weekly meetings can be in person or online, but they have to have a face-to-face component. So you can't meet with your team on Discord just using voice. You have to meet online in a way where you can see each other's faces. So for example, you could use Zoom if you want to do an online meeting. Now I recommend as you start getting towards the coding component in the course that you start making your meetings in person. This will make it a lot easier when you have shared coding sessions to be able to work together as well as help each other debug things and do sort of that pair programming approach that's harder to do in an online format. So these meeting times must be arranged in a way that work for everyone in your group. You can't exclude anyone. So they can't be on holidays and they can't be held on reading week. And the meeting length is up to your team. You can go over that 1 hour minimum, but it does have to be at least 1 hour. So the next responsibility for your team will be attending stand-up meetings with your assigned TA every other week. So each team is going to have a teaching assistant, TA, assigned, and you have to work with this TA to find a day and time every other week that works to hold the stand-up meeting. So these will be held over Zoom online, so you don't have to worry about finding a physical space, but you do have to make sure that you work with the TA to find the time. And this is your group's responsibility to ensure that you all find a time that works together. If for some reason you can't find a time, you do have to communicate that to both the TA and me as soon as possible. Remember, part of the essential requirements are attending these meetings, so you can't just wait till the end of the term and let me know. That would not be good. It would mean you wouldn't pass the course. So make sure that you do get this set up as soon as you know who your TA is and who your team is. These meetings with the TA are at most 20 minutes in length, and the idea here is to act as a sort of Scrum daily meeting, although it's going to be every other week, where you discuss the progress your group's made in the last weeks, create a plan for the tasks that will be completed during the next weeks, and work with the TA on any issues that have arisen over the last week. So it's important to keep the TA apprised of any issues you're facing, anything that might be holding your team back, so they can help you out, as well as report that to me if there's anything I need to deal with. It's also your team's responsibility to take minutes of the stand-up meetings. So you have to have meeting minutes for both your group meetings, which is your group members, as well as with the stand-up meeting with your assigned TA. And these stand-up meetings are meetings where you and everyone in your group attends together. They're not individual meetings. So since this is a meeting that happens every other week, it is going to be based on your team's number. So each team's going to be assigned a number, and whether that's odd or even will depend on which week you meet with your TA. So I have a schedule here, but in simple terms, if your team has an odd number, you'll be meeting on odd weeks. If your team has an even number, you'll be meeting with the TA on even weeks. See the schedule here for more details on exactly which week is which, as well as which weeks have meetings. Note that there's no meetings held on reading week, and the last week of the class, all teams are going to meet with the TA to do acceptance testing. The next group responsibility is creating a team contract with clear roles and expectations for your fellow team members. And this is what we're going to use to evaluate each other against during the peer evaluation at the end of the term. So this document should outline who does what, for example, maybe who takes minutes during the meeting, and describes this at a fairly high level. And you will be able to update this document as the project progresses, so long as everyone agrees. It should also outline things like minimum time requirements, when, where, and how team meetings are going to be held and the length of them, as well as things like how you're going to resolve conflicts in the group. The next requirement is you're going to have to decide on a common development environment and tools. So I highly recommend that everyone in your team uses the same sort of development environment. This will make things far easier when you need to start integrating your code together. So you should decide on things like what IDE, what third-party libraries you're going to be using to creating the project. The project specification, once that's posted, will have a few required tools. These will be things like using JUnit for unit testing or JavaDoc for documenting your code. And the last requirement or responsibility is that you demonstrate the project at the end of the term. As I already mentioned, there is going to be acceptance testing at the very end of the term, so you all have to be present for that, and you all have to show off your work. Another part of that is going to be creating a short demo video that shows off your project. So let's break down that group project a little bit more and take a look at the different components and milestones you'll have to achieve. So I have them listed here. These are requirements documentation, design documentation, implementation and testing, and project video and acceptance testing. These ones shown in purple are group components that you'll be doing as a group. At the end of the term, you'll be doing those peer reviews. This will be that's called a project postmortem, where you're going to sort of say how the project went, both for you and your fellow team members. And there'll also be a evaluation of you by your team. So you can see in this table, we have the weight of each of these components in terms of your final grade, the date that they'll be posted to on OWL, as well as the date that they're going to be due. All due dates are at 11:59 p.m. on the day listed. Now, there's some other important dates here. So the group specification or the group project specification is going to be posted by January 13th. Team requests are due January 18th. Team lists will be posted on January 20th. And team meetings are also going to start the week of January 20th. The project demonstration with the TA, that's the acceptance testing, will be scheduled between March 31st and April 4th. That's the last week of class. Now, there is a late policy for these group project components. So specifically, these are only the components that you do as a group, the purple ones here. And the way this is going to work in this course is we're going to have a late coupon system. Each team is going to be given 5 late coupons for the whole term, and once they're used, they're gone forever. These late coupons do not regenerate or come back after a group component. You have 5 for the whole term. If you use one on the requirements documentation, you don't have it for the next component. So what do these coupons do? Well, each late coupon adds a grace period of 24 hours per ticket used, up to a maximum of 3 tickets per project component. That means, assuming you have enough late coupons, you can push the due date or the no late penalty period back by up to 3 days per project component. But you only have 5 tickets, so you might want to make sure that you reserve them for when you really need them. So no action is required to use these tickets. You simply submit late, and the correct number of late coupons will be used by your TA. So you don't have to contact your TA to let them know you're using a late coupon. You don't have to contact me. Just simply submit late, and they will be used. But this does mean it's extremely important that you keep track of how many late coupons you have and ensure that you have enough late coupons left if you're going to submit late. And the reason for that is if you don't have enough late coupons and you submit late, the penalty is simply a 0 grade on that component. So please make sure you have enough late coupons remaining if you're going to submit late. Now, there are a few important exceptions to this late coupon policy, and they apply to a few different components. The first one is the final project video. So like I said, at the end of the project, you'll be creating a demo video. And what we'll use this demo video for is sharing it with some members from other teams, and they'll provide a review of your team's work. Because they need this video to complete that review, that means you can't submit the video late. The other thing that late coupons don't apply to are individual components, like the peer review of your team members. So if you submit these late, a 0 grade will simply be given on these components if they're not submitted by the due date, so please keep that in mind. Also, like I mentioned, late coupons are only for group work, so you can't apply them to things like quizzes, the final exam, or anything that's part of your individual grade and not your group project grade. So how are these components going to be graded? Well, they're usually going to be graded by the teaching assistant assigned to your group, as they'll be most familiar with your group's work, as well as how the project is going for your group. and we'll try to return them to you within 3 weeks of the due date, preferably sooner. Now, I should mention that just the components you submit aren't the only thing that's going to be marked for each milestone. Project management will also be part of each component's grade. This includes things like using the GitLab software to manage your project, taking meeting minutes, holding team meetings, and creating and following your team contract. So all that meta stuff that goes into running and doing a group project. On GitLab, we expect to see you working collaboratively on the project and not just uploading everything by one person at the end, right before the due date. We want to see that work from everyone on your team working on GitLab. Now, a quick word on academic dishonesty. And this is going to work a little bit differently in this course because most of the work is group work. So groups are encouraged to discuss the project together and ask questions about the project on the course forums, as well as talk to other groups about the group project. But no code or documentation should be shared between groups. Obviously, it's fine if you share it between your own group members. You need to do that to work on the project, but you shouldn't be sharing code or documentation with other groups. So when you're posting on the course forums to ask for help, please only post code fragments or small bits of your documentation. Don't give your whole solution away. This also means that you should be putting everything on Western's GitLab, at least until the end of the project. Don't post everything on a public repository where other teams could take from it. So if you use code or documentation from another source, for example, something you found online or generated with a tool, that's actually okay in this project, but please clearly indicate that and correctly cite it. So there'll be a few ways to cite that. If it's code, you can cite that in the comments in your code. If it's something more documentation-based, the documentation format we'll be using will have an area for citing things. Now, I do say you can take things from online sources as well as use generative tools in this course, but keep in mind if your whole project is generated by someone else or taken from someone else, that means you're not going to get much of a grade because we're only going to be grading the code that you did write. So please try to limit this to only places where you need it, where it makes sense. So only you and your group members can work on your project. You can't have any outside people like tutors, friends, who aren't group members, or outside services do the project for you. And you can't use pre-existing work from other courses. This includes past years of this course, past attempts at this course. For example, if you took it last term and are retaking it now, you can't use work from that past term. The reason why, that isn't your work, that's your group's work. So you would be submitting work of other group members that might not be taking it this term, so that would be an academic offense. So you can't use work from other courses. Everything has to be new work created by your team. If there is something you want to use from a previous course or a previous attempt, there is some cases where that might be allowed, but you have to have written permission from me, the course instructor, before you use it. So please contact me if there's anything you want to use that you did for another course or a previous attempt. So now I did mention there was a participation system in this course. So how's that going to work? Well, it's going to be based on a point system to use to track participation. I find this to be a little bit more objective rather than a subjective approach to monitoring students' participation, and it makes it a little bit easier for you to figure out how you're doing in the course. So points can be earned in a number of ways, both inside and outside of the classroom. So the number of participation points you have at the end of the course will determine your final participation grade. And each week in that Tuesday lecture, there'll be at least 150 points from in-class activities. So this is one of the primary ways to earn participation points. So it is important you attend that Tuesday lecture each week. Points can also be earned for a few other ways, such as posting answers to other students' questions on the course forums. If they haven't been answered yet, you can see the course syllabus for more details about what counts, as well as answering questions in class. If I ask a question, you stick up your hand, and I call on you to answer it, I'll give you a little ticket that you can enter into the CS1.ca tool, and this will give you participation points. You also get participation points for attending those stand-up meetings with your TA. So if you want a full list of what counts for participation, please see the course syllabus, which breaks it down, as well as how many points each one is worth. So how will this be translated into a final grade? So it will use this table here. You can see in the far right column, we have minimum participation points required to achieve a certain level, and that level will correspond to your final participation grade out of 10%. So down here, you can see if you get 2,000 participation points, you'll get a 10% participation grade. That's 10% of your final grade, so that would be a full participation grade. One thing to note is this isn't a linear scale, it's a curved scale. So it gets harder to get to the next level the more you go up each level. The other thing I'll note is you have to make it over each minimum to get to the next level. There is no partial levels. So for example, if you scored 450 points, it would be a level 3 and not a level 4 because it has to go over that minimum. It's sort of like experience points in a video game. Now I will point out, to get to this 2000 level, you should be able to do this by simply attending every Tuesday lecture, as well as attending every stand-up meeting with your team. So the system isn't too hard to get a full participation grade, and there are many other ways to earn participation points in case you miss a lecture or a stand-up meeting. The other thing I should mention is there is this level 11 here, which is bonus points. So if you somehow get over 2,500 participation points, which is intentionally going to be somewhat hard, you will get a bonus applied to your final grade that won't be more than 2%. Now, just because you get over 2,500 doesn't mean the bonus will be 2%. It'll be based on how far you get over 2,500. So if you get exactly 2,500, it probably will be a minimal bonus, like maybe 0.5%. But if you go way over 2,500, then you'd get the 2% bonus. So there's a few things to keep in mind with this participation system. The first is there's a limited number of opportunities for participation tickets. Remember, that's when you put up your hand and answer a question in class. But don't worry, you can still get the full participation mark without ever answering a question out loud in class. And that's because, like I said, just attending the classes on Tuesday and the stand-up meetings is enough to get you the full participation grade. The other thing is there is a limited number of opportunities to answer questions on the course forums. But again, this is an additional activity that you can do for getting bonus points or just to make up for missed classes. So it's best to focus on attending those Tuesday lectures and doing that group work in class, as well as not missing any lectures or stand-up meetings unnecessarily. Now, I did mention earlier that it was quizzes or a final exam. Now, to give you flexibility in how you want to do this course, you're given the choice of either writing 3 quizzes worth 12% each during the term, or writing a final exam worth 36% during the final exam period. Or there's actually a third choice, which is some combination of 1 and 2. When in this case, if you write, for example, 1 quiz, then the remaining worth of those quizzes that you didn't write will simply be shifted to the final exam. So if you missed 1 quiz, you wrote quizzes, let's say 2 and 3, but not quiz 1, then your final exam would be worth 12%. If you missed 2 quizzes, then your final exam would be 24%. If you didn't write any quizzes, then your final exam will be 36%. That does mean that if you write all 3 quizzes, then you don't take the final exam. The reason why we have this system is because we found that while you're working on that group project at the end of the term, it could be a bit stressful to also worry about studying for the final exam. So this gives you choice. You can choose, are you going to write those 3 quizzes during the term, or are you going to write the final exam and the final exam period? There are a few considerations here. If you write a quiz, you're locked into that percent. You can't write a quiz and then do the final exam, and that will replace it. That's not how it works. Once you write a quiz, that 12% is locked in. You're set. So only write a quiz if you're prepared to write a quiz. If you're feeling sick or feeling unready, then don't write the quiz, and you will have to write the final exam. The other consideration is the format of these. So the quizzes aren't comprehensive. They cover everything in the course up to that quiz. So that means they're going to be shorter, usually 40 minutes in length, and they'll cover less content, but there will be 3 of them. Whereas the final exam is going to be comprehensive and cover everything in the course, but will be 3 hours long. So there are some trade-offs to consider, but the choice is ultimately up to you. Let's talk a little bit more about the quizzes. So the quizzes are going to be conducted in person during the Friday lecture time. So that means if you want to write a quiz, you have to attend the lecture time on Friday in those weeks when a quiz is offered. The length of the quizzes may be different, but they'll never be more than 1 hour. You should expect 40 minutes. The format of each quiz might be slightly different, but it will be announced before the quiz, and I'll also post some studying questions. Quizzes are going to be closed book, no notes, references, electronic devices, and the content may cover any course material in the class, in videos, or in the assigned readings up until that point in the course. I'll give more exact list of content before each quiz. And we have a tentative schedule for when these quizzes will be held. So if you want to write the quizzes, make sure you're in the Friday lecture on these dates. The final exam, you can only write it if you didn't write one of the quizzes. Remember, it's quizzes or the final exam. So if you wrote all 3 quizzes, you can't write the final exam. However, if you missed 1 or more quizzes, you do have to write the final exam to get the weight of those quizzes back. They'll be shifted to that final exam. Final exam is going to be held during the final exam period. It's going to be 3 hours long, closed book, and comprehensive. The last thing we're going to talk about are weekly time requirements. This is how much time you're going to have to put into this course. The first requirement is going to be for in-person lectures. You have to attend those Tuesday lectures, and they are 2 hours per week. Next, there's going to be lecture videos posted to OWL that you're expected to watch in the week they're posted, but there'll be no more than 2 hours of lecture videos in a given week, usually less than that. There's also going to be weekly group meetings where you have to meet with your team. That's 1 hour per week at minimum. There's the TA group meetings. That's 20 minutes every other week. There's readings. Each week, there'll be about 2 chapters posted on average. Some weeks will have less, some weeks will have more, but never more than 3 chapters. And there is going to be recommended homework that we suggest that you do for studying purposes, but it is ungraded. And there is finally project work. This tends to be very minimal at the start of the course, but growing more significant near the end of the course where you start implementing and coding your project. So it is important that you plan for this. So that's all I have for you in this video. What you should do next is the syllabus quiz. On OWL, you can go to the quizzes section and you can take the syllabus quiz. This isn't directly part of your final grade, but you will get the 100 bonus participation points for completing it with a grade of 80% or over. And you can retake the quiz as many times as you want, and it's open book, so it should be fairly easy to get that 80%. You can find that on OWL Brightspace under Assessments, Quizzes. Complete that by January 30th to count for participation points. So you can start off the course with 100 participation points if you do that right now. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.